couple of months ago, I was asked by a friend. I've got one of those emails that you get every now and again. You kind of hope for when you're a writer, because it's so wonderful and odd and unexpected. And it was from a friend who was editing an anthology of poems that were in some way spooky, horrific, scary, or unsettling, and were about the sea or the seaside. So the question was, had I ever written anything that was spooky, scary, horrific, or unsettling, and set on the sea or at the seaside? And I hadn't. But I thought I could. And I have to say, the single scariest place that I've ever been is not any of the sort of the places that you'd imagine, graveyards at midnight kind of places, but Brighton in England in the off-season, when it's just sort of raining, but it's not really raining, it's just sort of drizzly, and there's nobody really around, and there's all these bed and breakfasts with rooms available signs, and people who look grey and furtive going. And so I wrote this about one of them. And it's called My Last Landlady. My last landlady, she was nothing like you, nothing at all alike. Her rooms were damp, the breakfasts were unpleasant. Oily eggs, leathery sausages, a baked orange sludge of beans. Her face could have curdled beans. She was not kind. You strike me as a kind person. I hope your world is kind. By which I mean, I've heard we see the world not as it is, but as we are. A saint sees a world of saints. A killer sees only murderers and victims. I see the dead. My landlady told me she would not willingly walk upon the beach, for it was littered with weapons, huge hand-fitting rocks, each ripe for striking. She only had a little money in her tiny purse, she said, but they would take the notes oily from her fingers and leave the purse tucked underneath a stone. And the water, she would say, hold anyone under, chill salt water, grey and brown, heavy as sin, all ready to drag you away. Children went like that so easily in the sea when they were surplus to requirements, or had learned awkward facts they might be inclined to pass on to those who would listen. There were people on the West Pier the night it burned, she said. The curtains were dusty lace and blocked each town-grimed window. Sea view, that was a laugh. The morning she saw me twitch her curtains to see if it was properly raining, she rapped my knuckles. Mr. Maroney, she said, in this house we do not look at the sea through the windows. It brings bad luck. She said, people come to the beach to forget their problems. It's what we do, it's what the English do. You chop your girlfriend up because she's pregnant and you worry what the wife would say if she found out. Or you poison the banker you're sleeping with for the insurance, marry a dozen men in a dozen little seaside towns. Margate, Torquay, Lord love them, but why must they stand so still? When I asked her who stood so still, she told me it was none of my beeswax and to be sure to be out of the house between midday and 4 as the char was coming and I would be underfoot and in the way. I've been in that B&B for 3 weeks now, looking for permanent digs. I paid in cash. The other guests were loveless folk on holiday and did not care if this was Hove or hell. We'd eat our slippery eggs together. I'd watch them promenade if the day was fine or huddle under awnings if it rained. My landlady cared only that they were out of the house until tea time. A retired dentist from Edgbaston, down for a week of loneliness and drizzle by the sea, would nod at me over breakfast, or if we passed on the seafront. The bathroom was down the hall. I was up in the night. I saw him in his dressing gown. I saw him knock upon her door. I saw it open. He went in. There's nothing more to tell. My landlady was there at breakfast, bright and cheery. She said the dentist had left early, owing to a death in the family. She told the truth. That night the rain rattled the windows. A week passed and it was time. I told my landlady I'd found a place and would be moving on, and paid the rent. That night she gave me a glass of whiskey, and then another, and said I had always been her favourite, and that she was a woman of needs, a flower ripe for plucking. And she smiled, and it was the whiskey made me nod and think she was perhaps a whit less sour of face and form, and so I knocked upon her door that night. She opened it. I remember the whiteness of her skin, the whiteness of her gown. I can't forget. "Mr. Maroney," she whispered. I reached for her, and that was forever that. Channel was cold and salt wet, and she filled my pockets with rocks to keep me under, so when they find me, if they find me, I could be anyone. Crab-eaten flesh and sea-washed bones and all. I think I shall like it here, in my new digs, here on the seashore, and you have made me welcome. You have all made me feel so welcome. How many of us are there here? I see us, but I cannot count. We cluster on the beach and stare at the light in the uppermost room of her house. We see the curtains twitch. We see a white face glaring through the grime. She looks afraid, as if one loveless day we might start up the pebbles towards her, to rebuke her for her lack of hospitality, to tear her for her bad breakfasts and her sour holidays and our fates. We stand so still. Why must we stand so still?